Welcome to Happy Times and Places, in which I, Toby Haydock, see if I can guess my special guest's favourite things about a Doctor Who story.
Hello, my name's Daragh Carville. I'm a playwright and screenwriter. I'm the creator of the ITV crime drama The Bay. And the Doctor Who story I'd like Toby to look at is Kinda.
Well, welcome to the jungle. It's part 3 of Kinda. Daragh Carville is our illustrious guest. I'm grateful to him for choosing such a fascinating story. There's no way I can be as interesting as the story itself, but I shall try my very best, and I hope you are enjoying either discovering it, rediscovering it, or perhaps reassessing it in light of this chat that I'm going to provide you with over the next 25 minutes or so, after we've all pressed play. I am on the Blu-ray in 3, 2, 1, go. Phew, right. I was quite mean about Twitter in the last episode, but actually Twitter is the reason I know our illustrious guest, who, lest we forget, is a top TV writer and executive producer who has created his own series that has just been commissioned for a third. What an achievement. ITV, prime time. It's been massively streamed all over the place. He's a guest on this podcast because when I was doing my Who's Round podcast, he offered to put me in touch, or tried to put me in touch, with the actor Sean Caffrey, who played Lord Palmerdale in Horror of Fang Rock, but sadly Sean was poorly and actually died that year. But Daragh and I met up for a drink and had a bit of a chat, and sort of kept in touch, online, and then bumped into each other at a Promenade Theatre production in Lancaster one Christmas a few years ago, and I realised he lived actually not too far from me. So, of course, I asked him to do this. But yes, we would not know each other were it not for an initial Twitter chat. So I know it sometimes seems like there's a load of Doctor Who fans who all meet up in a Doctor Who, who work in the industry, all meet up and don't want to talk to any other Doctor Who fans. It's just absolute pure coincidence that on my friends list is somebody who's done extremely well for themselves, whilst I hang around in obscure corners of the internet trying to be interesting about every single second of Doctor Who, including this part 3 of Kinda, which has that brilliant, it doesn't cheat, that scream from Nerys Hughes was absolutely right, and brilliantly done and filmed at the end of part 2, and then continues for the payoff here, which is entirely in keeping with what we'd seen before. And then I love the way the Doctor deadpans absolutely nothing. He does a sort of cod comedy thing to prick the bubble of Hindle's threat and authority. And Simon Rouse's turn the lights on is brilliant, and this gets very atmospheric. Hindle is scared. The Doctor and Todd see what's in the box, which of course there's nothing in the box apart from clarity, and the Kinda and Mary Morris beckoning. Now, the Kinda are an interesting bunch. Here's an observation. So this is what they are seeing in their mind's eye that will take them to, again, the stuff that I, as a kid, I didn't really understand, and it doesn't. It doesn't go out of its way to explain itself either. I wonder if it could do with a few more lines of explanation, or whether the fact that it makes you work hard is actually part and the parcel of what it's doing, and should, we complain when stuff is spoon-fed to us. He's got real tears coming out of his eyes there, Richard Todd. Proper actor. Very, very good. Bless him. Look at that. And that Look at that. That's such a wonderful piece of acting. I love this urgency with the door. This I've mentioned it before about, but the way they tell sheep horse. That's great because all of that stuff is potentially very clunky. It has to be done continuous in the studio. They're just leaving a building. They're leaving a dome, but it's Doctor Who, so it has to have some jeopardy to it. So. And you do sort of, if you're confronted with a door closing, you go, oh, what am I doing? The Doctor's seen many a door nearly closing. He has to jump and get out. And I love that dynamic that they've got going on. And it's just those little bits that can rescue, clunky egress and awkward staging and movement in comparatively small sets. You don't have to worry about that sort of thing when you're making television now so much, because it's not as continuous. But it's stuff that you needed classy and experienced and technically minded actors to do. Their relationship is absolutely brilliant. These two, the Davison Doctor's got a thing about Liverbirds because I like his relationship with Polly James in The Awakening as well, who was also like Nerys Hughes in a series called The Liverbirds, which my mother knew and talked of, a comedy sitcom. There's Todd wiping his eyes there. Now, Adric, of course, has these funny relationships with people in power, because he does it with Monarch in Four to Doomsday, the story immediately before this, where he's not kidding. I don't think he genuinely thinks that Monarch has the right ideas, and is a bit of a twit. And he's sort of doing the same thing here. I think the impression is that he's inveigling his way into Hindle's trust in order to, have an angle on what's going on. But Adric does have the habit of getting into trouble, and I think we were supposed to identify that and find it endearing, and I'm not sure that was always the case. He's so good. He's so good. And yes, and of course, because he's not. It's very interesting. I was thinking that Hindle was always quite ranty, but he's not at all. He's now sort of got that childlike hope of keeping the outside away. And of course, there is something childish about fear. Even when it's manifested by grown-up politicians or military people or whatever, adults expressing themselves and their paranoias. There is something very childlike, but childish and childlike at the core. There's Johnny Lee Miller again, film star Johnny Lee Miller. Now the Kinder, yes indeed, because and this is Lee Corns as the trickster. And it's funny, I'm sure I read something somewhere about a studio report. It may have been in the unfolding text again, but it may have been somewhere else, where Lee Corns got annoyed with Peter Grimwade or vice versa, or there was a bit of a problem. He didn't feel like he was getting enough direction, and I remember reading that and thinking, but hang on, he's in Doctor Who. He should just be happy. The idea that as an actor you could get frustrated on the studio floor and as a relatively small part actor be annoyed with the director. I didn't understand how those dynamics occurred at all. I do know, and I think Lee Corns does a great job, and he became something of a sort of TV regular. He was always cropping up in small parts in Blackadder, and he's even in the Doctor Who sketch in the Lenny Henry show. Lenny Henry does I think a rather fun Doctor Who sketch. The only bit that annoyed me when he said Perry, this is a children's program. But Lee Corns is the sort of the scruffy Earthman who helps them and gets left behind. He goes, oi oi oi, what about me? But he was in all sorts of comedy stuff, Lee Corns, and then became a regular in Grange Hill for ages and ages and ages. So but he was very much an 80s face, a bit like Mark Arden and Danny Peacock and a lot of those guys who were the sort of regular comedy character actors in things. I always rather fancied that as a career, that being that guy that you sort of went, oh, it's him again. Um, so I was, but I hadn't realised that at the time, because I think he probably wasn't quite that yet. And then when I, realised who Lee Corns was, it was only then looking back over casts, go, oh, and he's the guy, and I'd remembered the character. And it's another sort of nice addition to the cast, and another member of the cast who has who generates headlines in the interesting observation in the Cast Observer, which is a newspaper that only I read and write. And she's just walked past there, Glenn Murphy off of London's Burning, who is Dibber in The Trial of a Time Lord, The Mysterious Planet, who went on to be in London's Burning, is uncredited in this. He is an extra in this, who is an OBE. Now listen up. I contend off the top of my head, so don't write in, is this the Doctor Who story with the most honoured, as in terms of honours from Her Majesty the Queen, guest cast? Because also at the back there you can see Graham Cole, another Bill alumnus, who plays PC Tony Stamp in the Bill for years and years and years, who is another sort of, he's a different sort of copper. He's the typical sort of stoical, tall, straightforward copper. And who was basically, Graham Cole, he was an extra who got promoted, because he's an extra in loads of Doctor Who's. He's Melker. And he's a Kinder, but he went on to, I think, be, policeman 2 lines in the Bill, and gradually got given more and more to do. And he's done loads of charity work, so he is an OBE. Glenn Murphy, who went on to be in London's Burning, is an OBE, and Richard Todd was a CBE. I'm surprised Richard Todd didn't get knighted, actually. I don't know who he annoyed, because he was a film star, Oscar nominee, and he was always doing something like Dial M for Murder at the Theatre Royal Bath. He was a genuine movie star, Todd, and a war hero. I mean, his war record is astonishing, and I don't know if it will be out yet, but if it's not, one of my indefinable magics is about the war records of Doctor Who actors, and Todd was, involved in some quite important battles, and had and was a senior officer, involved in some quite important moments of the Second World War, without such people, the world might be in a more parlous state than it is. But anyway, even though he wasn't knighted, Richard Palethorpe Todd, I think he was called. I think he is of good stock. He rather sadly, though, I think he had 2 sons who committed suicide, which must be, oh dear, how terribly sad. But anyway, yeah, Todd. I once was driven to a location by a driver once, and they quite often give me, oh well, I've driven all sorts in this. I remember somebody saying that they picked Todd up, quite late in his life. He'd agreed to do something, but it was, you got to pick me up from a front door and drop me back. He said Todd was an absolute delight. What a charming man. I like the thing about, I don't know how the 7 fathers things works. I mean, presumably you don't need 7 to create the biological spark, because otherwise there'd be all sorts of who goes first. But I presume it's to do with the upbringing, but perhaps we shouldn't go into that. But I love these scenes that are totally carried by Simon Rouse, who is, as I say, it's the he commits to it. There's nothing coy about it, and I think you absolutely have to do that. And Grimwade knows where to point the camera as well. Grimwade is a very, very good director at ratcheting up the tension, knowing the speed of which to cut, where the camera lands, what the framing is, and I think we don't necessarily equate those sorts of directors with being good directors. Now, I don't know whether it's just that he's very good at casting, and so lets the actors get on with it, because I have interviewed some actors who found him either not particularly helpful or a bit standoffish, and I think he was quite testy and quite prissy, and perhaps quite he could be quite tricky, I think, if you weren't on his wavelength. And I think he was so intelligent that he didn't have time to explain stuff to actors who wanted to, stare at their navel or whatever. So I don't know if he just cast well and knew that he could let them get on with it, or whether good intelligent actors know that that's what the director is doing, and so they trust him because he's clearly doing good work, and he doesn't need them to sort of they don't need to be shepherded through by him. But whatever, he's a great technical dramatic storytelling director who also gets very, very good performances from his cast. And this is great. I mean, it's at the expense of the Doctor, which is interesting. Interesting box, Toby. In that, the Doctor, the Doctor's, what is it? He's the man that's wise enough to know that he's stupid. And I like the fact that he sort of goes along with it and takes it, and that Todd Daris Hughes finds it so amusing. And look at the lighting in this. And I was quite very pleased when Mary Morris came out of the cave that it looked like it might be quite small, but actually it was quite big around her. But I love all of that this music, which wasn't on the music record that I had, bizarrely, because it's great. It's really ominous, and it is about the wheel turning, and she you need to be a certain kind of actor to get away with this stuff, and she does it brilliantly. And look at the lighting. That green lighting is superb. Who is the lighting director? I must double check that, because having said that the jungle lighting is on a hiding to nothing, this cave lighting here, this green stuff is brilliant. This shot of her is superb. But you need an actor like I understand. I can see that there's very good acting in some of the some modern television where it's much quieter, less sort of classically influenced, and it's people mumbling sadly about being on benefits or whatever. And I understand the importance of that, and I know it's vital stuff. And I do like a social drama, but the stuff that speaks to me is the stuff where you get somebody talking about wheels turning and civilizations falling, and doing it with contained apocalypse. Is there another form of the word apocalypse? You can do something apocalyptically. Contained apocalypsism. Can you have that? But so yes, whilst low-key kitchen sink, socially aware dramas with very naturalistic performances are to be admired. The ones that have me acting in my bedroom and thinking about and getting nourished by my meat and drink, if you like, is this stuff that is slightly Shakespearean, because to me it takes me beyond the confines of our current world. It takes me a window into a world that is bigger and bolder and scarier and yet more enriching and terrifying and all those sorts of things. It's just more to get your teeth into. And these huge battles between world-ending concepts, and this is is there a moment here where she said, when she does the "What are you?" and it's like a sort of lightning bolt. It's absolutely extraordinary. And I love her sort of, she's afeared, but she's also and the way that she does that, it ends and then she says ends again. She is Mary Morris is absolutely extraordinary. She was the sort of actor that was made. I love the way she does that. What are you? And the music really helps as well. that sting, that sharp sting, like a cobra spitting, an electronic cobra, but nonetheless. And it is a load of loincloth extras in front of her. They haven't even got any depth of field in that. It's just that they've just given up with that set. Really, the whiteness beyond. There's it's a bit like being in the theatre. The set immediately around the actors is giving the impression, and you just have to imagine the rest of it. I used to, and on my video of this, just as it got to the climax of this bit, the video jumped, and so it sort of ruined the clip, because I always imagined doing clip compilations to do the rounds to show everybody how brilliant Doctor Who was. She's so good. She's so good. And so what she's doing here, this peculiar, another peculiar sequence coming up, and about the inevitability of destruction if we're left to our own devices. And of course all of these things, this dome with its explosives and that, and even the suit that Adric puts around him, the TSS machine, the suit that of course he cannot control, so what he uses to protect himself actually becomes something very destructive. It all sort of ties in. This music is terrific as well, and I mean this sequence. I know there are some people who think this sequence is the best thing in all of Doctor Who. It is again quite an extraordinary and strange thing, and of course that explains why that backdrop is just clear white, because you need it to have this funny sort of goo video effect that they walk through. And here we go. So you get another shot of Glenn Murphy there. So the poor Kinder are having to mull about, and it's interesting because I used to sometimes think back in the day, those clocks date it, but of course only the clocks that we see as modern clocks date it, because the egg timer, the metronome, the sundial, they don't date it because they're from the past. It's only that clock with the I can't remember. We've actually got one a bit like that with where what's it called? It doesn't matter. The clock. I mean the one where it flips round. And I think I was quite self-conscious about going that. Well, that dates it. It's because it looked modern then. But they all look a little bit old-fashioned. I suppose it would be nice now. Perhaps what we need to do with the modern CGI version is to put a few more modern clocks on some of the plinths. But isn't it extraordinary how all this is a series of different timepieces on stock Roman columns, because of course a candle isn't dated, and a few extras and a bit of smoke, and a man from That's Life laughing, and an alarm clock, and yet it signifies the end of everything. What a cliffhanger that would have been! But they go for the slightly more literal one. Which am I remembering it wrong? Did John Nathan Turner said you can't end on the dream? You have to end a bit later. If not, I might be wrong on that. But I think this is a slightly enforced cliffhanger. But I actually think that's probably a slightly better choice. Because I think ending on a dream sequence is a bit bold for early 80s Doctor Who. I'd be a bit bold now, I think. What a strange and beguiling thing it is. It really is strange, isn't it? And I can sort of understand why it's not to everybody's taste. But I love it because I think that you can see so much in it. And I also think the bit that should be a bit pony, the the crazy base commander bit is done so skillfully, and it's got a top director, and it's got a top cast, and it's got a script that is asking you questions. Mike Jeffries lighting, well done, Mike Jeffries. A script that is not afraid, to make you question it. Could a line or two have helped? Maybe not. I don't know. The fact that I go away thinking about it every time, and I'm not quite confident with this. You see, I think I know what I should say, and then as I'm saying it, I'm going, no, I need to listen to this, but of course I can't with this podcast. So it's tricky. I think that's good. Because I'm certainly not. I'm not. It's not so out there that I'm clueless, and I'm lost. And and Davison's very good at selling the urgency and all of that. So it's still a drama story at its core, and I still think it works with those fundamentals of 4 episodic Doctor Who adventure. It's just that not all of it is spoon fed to us, and I think that's to its credit. And now Daragh, he sort of segued into. I have to say he's not great. Dara's not great at episode endings here, because he's sort of segueing from one to the other, and I'm having to guess where to stop. But he said episode 3, having sort of made his point about language with episode 2, he started making a language point about episode 3, which I think is his segue into episode 3. So he's good. He's feeding it through to the next episode, you see, rather than stopping on a cliffhanger. But it means that I slightly struggle to know when to stop his points. So he did language for 2. What's he going to do for 3? Oh, what am I going to do for 3? Well, I'm going to sort of roll it all into it. I'm going to have those sequences with Panna, with that shot where she's doing the Mara meat and drink and all of that, and that apocalyptic windy music, and the dream sequence, all of that stuff about the wheel turning and civilization rising and falling, and how that is enunciated in that sort of doomy fashion by Panna into that dream sequence that she conjures. So the dream sequence, but with a bit of retconning back to the introduction of it as well, with Panna's summation of just how terrible everything is, but which is done so gloriously well.
There's another one in episode 3 when Panna says, "The wheel turns, civilizations rise. The wheel turns, civilizations fall." Now, there's been a lot said and written about the ideas in Kinda, the Buddhist and Christian imagery. But I think what's most powerful for me is not necessarily the intellectual content of the story, interesting though that is, but it's the music of the story. It's the poetry, because for me, Kinda is one of the Doctor Who stories that achieves the quality of poetry.
Well, okay. So the music and the poetry of Kinda. Do I get that because of Panna's stuff? I don't think I. I mean, it doesn't matter. Can I get half a point for that? You decide. I mean, it's quite nice if it's not really clear whether Daragh and I are choosing the same thing. Yeah, it's not clear. I will leave it to the viewer's imagination. You keep questioning whether we were on the same wavelength or not. I like that, though, the poetry of the story and the music, and of course the music being in the language, which sort of harks back to his point for episode 2 as well. I love that episode of Doctor Who. I really love that stuff in the caves. And I hope you're enjoying this as well. I wonder if it's a story that you like better now than you liked when you were a child. It's certainly the case with me, which, as I say, does sometimes make me ponder and go, well, what's right? Or, well, for me, it's perfect, because I am somebody that revisits Doctor Who over and over again, so it's great for me if I can come back to something and see something different in it and like something more every time I revisit it. Sometimes I like stories less when I revisit them, but that's good, because then the next time I go in going, no, I didn't like this as much last time. And I go, oh, no, I like all these things about it. It's great. But that's because I watch Doctor Who too often. But at least this time, I'm talking all the way through it in order to benefit you lot. So I hope that was okay. And that you will join me when I will show you a great big pink snake that we need to get to grips with in episode 4, the final episode of Kinder, in the next edition of Happy Times and Places. But for now, it's the end of everything as far as this episode is concerned. Bye! Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which was presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest was Daragh Carville. Special thanks to patrons Ruben Herfindahl, Rob Leonard, Stephen Moffat, Richard Straw, Jenny at Bluebox 99, Paul Cook, Rob Dawson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Siobhan Galichon, Ian Key, Joe Llewellyn, Darren Mackay, Andrew, Luke Adkins, Peter Adamson, Will Brooks, Rick Byatt, Paul Carrington, Andy Case, John Curley, Ian Gillespie, James Gould, Lisa C. Greco, Dave Hoskin, and Guy Lambert. The music for this podcast is specially composed by Dave Gates, and the podcast artwork is by Dylan Patterson. If you fancy having your name read out on the credits, then you can become a patron at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. You also get advance releases and exclusive material. You could do a one-off contribution if you'd prefer at kofi.com/Toby Haydock, or you could simply just rate and review these podcasts as positively as you can, wherever you can. Any of those things helps, but as does listening, so thanks for doing that too. Please subscribe to the Toby Haydock YouTube channel, where you can get video versions of this podcast, and you can also tune in to twitch.tv/Excess Monarchy every Tuesday night at 8 p.m, where I'll be doing comedy with special guests from the UK, US, and beyond stand-up circuit.